Teuvo Teravainen has got his swagger back.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Do me a quick favor, go and hit that like button. Jump in the comment section down below as well, and make sure that you're subscribed to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Really getting close to my goal of 2,000 subscribers. Would greatly appreciate it if you could all go and hit that subscribe button for me. And last but certainly not least, do got to give a shout out to the College Football Playoff. The College Football Playoff is here, and you won't want to miss out on a moment of the action. The College Football Playoff, presented by Allstate, begins with 4 first-round games December 20th and 21st on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Hope everyone's Wednesday is off to a wonderful start. Do want to apologize for not having a show come out yesterday, as I'm sure you all may be able to tell as of right now, or will probably be able to tell at some point throughout today's episode. I've been kind of having some coarseness in my voice these last couple of days. Kind of was worried that I had strep throat. Fortunately, it looks like I dodged that, but man, this time of the year always gets me seemingly every single year. But back on the show here today, and what an epic comeback victory for the Blackhawks that I got to break down. Arguably their biggest character win of the entire season in my mind. And how good was it, Blackhawks fans, to see the Hawks being the team surging and coming back in the third period instead of being the ones blowing it. Blackhawks with 3 unanswered goals in the third period to storm back from a 2-0 deficit and beat the Washington Capitals 3-2. That gives them back-to-back victories for the first time since early on in November, and only the second time here this season. And they'll actually be going for 3 in a row tomorrow against the Seattle Kraken, something they haven't accomplished since the 2022-2023 campaign. But Anders Sorensen, interim coach for the Blackhawks, moves to 3-0 in 6 games behind the Blackhawks bench. And even in those 3 losses, Hawks fans, like if you've been watching this team, if you've continued to watch this team recently, then you can just tell there's so much more offensive upside compared to what they were previously doing under Luke Richardson's system. Because I'll tell you what, Blackhawks fans, I don't think there was any way with Luke Richardson still as the Blackhawks head coach that this offensive bunch was going to muster up 3 unanswered goals to go and steal this one in the third period. Didn't start off great for the Blackhawks, though, as a pair of horrendous defensive plays in one-on-one situations from Louis Crevier and TJ Brodie early on in the first period put the Blackhawks in a little bit of a hole. Pierre-Luc Dubois, Andrew Mangiapane with 2 unbelievable goals. I don't know why I couldn't say that. Put the Blackhawks in a little bit of a deficit early, but other than that, in the opening 40 minutes, the Blackhawks did a lot of good things in this game. They had the lead in every 5-on-5 measure. They also limited the Capitals to only 11 shots on goal through 2 periods, with 4 of them coming in the final minute of the second period. So Hawks were doing a lot of good things prior to the third period. They were just unable to solve Logan Thompson through the opening 40. But as I mentioned, then came the third period. What went right for the Blackhawks to rack up their second consecutive victory? First and foremost, they never gave up. They didn't get down on themselves or frustrated or disheartened there in that third period when they weren't able to solve Logan Thompson. Instead, they just stuck with it, played with passion, played with energy, intensity, heart, played for one another. And honestly, it might have been the most proud I've been of this team the entire season. You could tell the fans on tap at the United Center were having a ton of fun, tons of energy, lots of loud chants during this comeback victory. Love to see that the Blackhawks stuck with their game plan, didn't get discouraged, and that led to a huge performance in the final 20 minutes. But aside from the Blackhawks never giving up, what truly went right for them in the final frame was Teuvo Teravainen getting his swagger back, baby. And I talked on Monday's show after his 3-point game to help the Blackhawks beat the New York Islanders. I mentioned that, man, this would be huge for the Blackhawks offense as a whole, right? With Bedard now starting to find his groove, Hall and Bertuzzi getting going, the defensemen being more involved, and just the style that this Blackhawks team is playing. There's so much more offensive opportunity. How big would it be to get Teuvo Teravainen going? Well, that seems to be exactly what happened. He seems to have found his swagger once again. Back-to-back 3-point performances out of Teuvo Teravainen, 3 assists in the third period. Huge difference maker for the Blackhawks. And if he keeps up this style of play, that's also going to be a huge difference maker for this Blackhawks offense. And even though it hasn't been very consistent of a campaign for Teuvo Teravainen, he is now second on the Blackhawks with 19 points this year. Again, we know the upside is there. We've seen it in multiple games. Last night against the Caps, Sunday against the Islanders, earlier on in the year against the Sharks and the Edmonton Oilers, in which he had a 4-point game, right? Like, those high ceiling type of performances are there for Teuvo Teravainen. We just need to see it a little bit more consistently. Flash in a point or two every now and then a little bit more often, and it's going to pay such dividends for this Blackhawks offense. And I am curious to see if Teuvo Teravainen, following these back-to-back 3-point performances, is going to get a bump up to the top line along with Connor Bedard. However, this next guy that I got to shout out, Ilya Mikheyev, had a phenomenal performance as well. Kickstarted the Blackhawks comeback, by the way, with a shorthanded tally in the opening minute of the third period. First shorthanded goal of the entire season for the Blackhawks. Mikheyev also went on to add a primary assist on TJ Brody's goal. 2-point performance out of him, and that quietly now gives Mickey 6 points over the past 11 games. He's starting to find his footing a bit more here in Chicago, and the reason why I do wonder if we could see Teuvo remain on the third line is because interim coach Andrew Sorensen gave a little bit of a shout out to Mikheyev following the game and said that he has been working really well these past few games with his skating and the chemistry that he's established with Teuvo Teravainen. So maybe we see those two with one another again on the Blackhawks third line. We'll see if Teuvo eventually gets back up with Bedard at some point in time. But if he keeps playing like this, I think ultimately you're going to have to give him top line minutes once again. And speaking of Mikheyev and the penalty kill, what a phenomenal performance out of the Blackhawks while shorthanded last night. Penalty kill remains absolutely unreal. 4th in the NHL on the season. The Hawks went 3 for 3 last night. They've now killed off 28 consecutive penalties over their past 10 games, dating back to the final game of November against the Minnesota Wild. And not only did they go perfect and have some more crucial kills in the third period, like they did on Sunday against the Islanders, the Blackhawks really had to batten down the hatches in the final frame to stay alive and have an opportunity, because they got 4 consecutive power play opportunities in the second period. The calls went Washington's way in the third, but the penalty kill not only got all those kills, but it kick-started this Blackhawks comeback effort with a shorthanded tally for the penalty kill to outscore the Capitals power play. Absolutely huge difference maker in this game. And Ryan Donato, last but certainly not least, keeps leading by example. That's what went right for the Blackhawks in crunch time. Donato winds up with the game-winning goal with just under 3 minutes to play. His team-leading 11th tally of the season. And how did he do it? Wasn't with anything fancy. It was with grit, determination, the drive, putting his head down, getting to the front of the net, and stuffing it home, not being denied at any cost. Those are the type of plays that make me fall in love with Ryan Donato, man. There's nothing fancy about his game, but he gets it done. Shoots the puck whenever he gets an opportunity, goes to the dirty areas, and again, he keeps getting rewarded for it. So many of these Blackhawks forwards should be taking a page out of the Ryan Donato playbook, because it's not like he's blowing it past opposing goaltenders for all 11 of his goals. Yeah, there's been a couple dandies in there, but a lot of them are coming from the dirty areas. Huge cap tip for Ryan Donato for putting his head down, doing the dirty work, and coming up huge for the Blackhawks with the game-winning goal. And I also loved the emotion on Ryan Donato's face following that goal as well. You could just tell how much that comeback and that goal meant to this Blackhawks group. Super happy for them. Super happy for Ryan Donato. Super happy for Teuvo Teravainen. Hopefully this character victory has a snowball effect for the Blackhawks and they can get on a little bit of a roll here, because again, even though they have lost 3 of 6 games under Andrew Sorensen as the interim coach, There is so much more potential for this group under his style of play. Hopefully Teuvo can keep it going. Hopefully Ryan Donato can keep it going. Hopefully the penalty kill can keep it going. And hopefully the Blackhawks can go in, do something they haven't done since the 2022-2023 campaign on Thursday by keeping this mojo and taking it to the Seattle Kraken. But there are my thoughts from the Blackhawks' epic 3-2 comeback win over the Washington Capitals last night. One of the most fun games of the entire season thus far. Coming up in just a moment, Blackhawks fans, don't go anywhere, because I will talk about whether we could see the Hawks pursue Dylan Cozens or Kaapo Kakko. Real quick, though, I do got to talk to you all about a new sponsor here with the Locked On Podcast Network, which is Built Rewards. Listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in the loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? Well, it's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards, and that's where Built Rewards comes in. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. It's as simple as that. And you can use points toward a dream vacation or toward a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. So go and earn points right now by paying rent when you go to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNHL. Again, that's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNHL. Make sure to use that URL so they know we sent you, and you can start earning points today with Built Rewards. I also got to talk to you all real quick about SelectQuote. The World Series, the Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also now protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. And in sports, winning is everything. That's why you always need a good strategy to keep you moving towards the goalposts. Winning strategies for life are just as important, and that's why on my team, I have life insurance through SelectQuote to protect my legacy and my family's financial future. So go and get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. Again, that's SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, just a reminder to go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast if you haven't done so already. I appreciate you all for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen every day, but go and make Locked On Fantasy Hockey your second listen so that you can become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. And you can find Locked On Fantasy Hockey down below in the description, or simply search on YouTube and wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2, I've had numerous questions over the past week or so on Mailbag Monday and just even in some of my comments on social media revolving Buffalo Sabres forward and 2019 7th overall pick Dylan Cozens, 6'3", 200-pound center who's set to turn 24 years old in February, someone who I really was high on back when I was scouting out the 2019 NHL draft, which is hilarious because thinking about how much hockey knowledge I've grown in 5 years, like I had no idea what I was talking about with prospects 5 years ago. I was a 21-year-old kid who was just starting to get his feet wet. But Dylan Cozens was someone who I was really high on and I thought could be in the conversation for the Blackhawks possibly at the time. They had the number 3 overall pick, which we know ended up being Kirby Dach. But yeah, for Cozens, burst onto the NHL scene and got off to a really good start with the Buffalo Sabres. 38 points in his sophomore campaign and then absolutely exploded during his junior year with 68 points, 31 goals, 37 assists. Unfortunately, he had a bit of a regression last year with only 47 points, down to 18 goals and only 29 assists in 79 games. But this year has been even tougher as Cozens has been limited to only 14 points through his opening 32 games, 7 goals and 7 assists. Buffalo as a team is absolutely atrocious, dead last in the entire Eastern Conference. So there could be a change of scenery coming for Dylan Cozens. The tricky part in all of this is not only Cozens' regression these last couple of years, but he also signed on a long-term deal with the Sabres at $7.1 million through the end of the 2029-2030 campaign. And that's a lot of money to commit to a kid who, again, hasn't had the same type of success these last couple of seasons. Yeah, I'm sure some of that is attributed to the Buffalo Sabres team failures and whatnot, but still, that's not something you can just bat an eye at in today's salary cap NHL day and age. Not very many teams, if any, can just take on $7.1 million and have no worries about adding that to their cap whatsoever. But as far as whether the Blackhawks should be interested, I mean, yeah, absolutely they should be interested. Dylan Cozens is a right-handed shot, 6'3", 200 pounds, has decent wheels, plays the center ice position, has put up some pretty good face-off numbers for being a young guy, 49% for the Sabres so far this year. We know the Blackhawks clearly could use some help down the middle. The real tricky part about the Dylan Cozens situation, though, is the Buffalo Sabres, do not have to make a move. And this is one that is absolutely going to cost the Blackhawks because of that. Yeah, the Sabres are in a tough situation, but they're just not going to punt on Dylan Cozens for the sake of punting on him and making a change and trying to stir up the organization and take them another direction. No, it is going to cost the Blackhawks if they want to go and get Dylan Cozens. And the tricky part about this is I just don't know exactly whether the Blackhawks, have the pieces to give the Sabres what they want in order to move on from Dylan Cozens, or two, will Kyle Davidson feel comfortable giving up the type of pieces it would take in order to retrieve a Dylan Cozens? Because quite honestly, Blackhawks fans, I've seen the Philip Kurashev and Connor Murphy solutions. Philip Kurashev has no trade value. He's being healthy scratched by the worst team in the NHL right now. Philip Kurashev can't even get in that lineup. He has no points in his last 9 games now, has looked like a shell of himself from last year. There is no trade. He's not a center iceman. There's no value there for Philip Kurashev. Connor Murphy is, a solution on the second pairing, but this Buffalo Sabres team isn't going to be a playoff squad this year. Connor Murphy is not someone that's going to move the needle for them. The question we have to ask ourselves here is, what will the Buffalo Sabres want? And looking at them from afar, I don't have the best insight into their prospect pool, exactly how everyone's been developing and whatnot, but from afar, it feels like the Sabres have a lot of good young defensemen. I know there have been some hiccups for a few of them. Owen Power, Rasmus Dahlin looks great as well. They have Bowen Byram. Like, they have a young blue line that I think has potential there. So I doubt they're trying to add another huge piece on the back end. And again, it's going to take a big noteworthy piece in order to get Dylan Cozens. So to me, I think the Sabres would either want a big forward prospect, legitimate high-end draft help, or some help immediately. Quite honestly, I don't think the Blackhawks can give them help immediately. First off, the Blackhawks, again, are the worst team in the NHL. There's not too many attractive pieces on this roster right here, right now for the prices they're being paid. And also, with this Blackhawks team starting to find their groove, like, who exactly is expendable among this forward group? If Andreas Athanasiou was healthy and still up at the NHL level and showing some signs of consistency after that knee injury last year, then maybe he'd be someone who's in this conversation. But again, it would take a lot more than just Andreas Athanasiou for the Buffalo Sabres to trade Dylan Cozens. So to me, Blackhawks fans, I think if you want Dylan Cozens, if you want a 6'3", 200-pound center iceman who has shown some upside, even though it's been tough these last couple of years, I still think it's going to cost them probably Sasha Boisvert or Oliver Moore. It's going to cost them one of their big forwards. And I don't know if Kyle Davidson would feel comfortable enough, considering the strides those two kids have made in college hockey. I don't know if he'd feel comfortable enough moving on from them, especially when they were the two focal pieces. I know, obviously, we didn't know it at the time, but they were the two huge draft picks that we got in exchange for Brandon Hagel. And I know Davidson is high on Sasha Boisvert, who, as I'll get into here in a moment in segment 3, is having an outstanding freshman year. Like, I don't think he necessarily wants to trade either of these guys. He was super thrilled about getting Oliver Moore 19th overall. He's had a good first 2 years of college hockey at Minnesota. Like, I just don't know if Kyle Davidson would want to move on from those pieces to take a gamble on Dylan Cozens, who, again, is being paid $7.1 million for the next handful of years. That's going to put the Blackhawks in a little bit of a corner. So the Dylan Cozens trade seems very, very unlikely to me, Blackhawks fans, for multiple different reasons. Should they be kicking the tires? Yeah, Kyle Davidson should absolutely be kicking the tires here to see what they're asking for. I doubt these two teams are going to be able to reach an agreement, though, ultimately for Dylan Cozens. Interestingly enough, another 2019 NHL another high-end pick from the 2019 NHL draft has been mentioned among trade rumors here recently, Blackhawks fans, and that's Kaapo Kakko, the second overall pick from that year of the New York Rangers. Got healthy scratched a couple of nights ago against the St. Louis Blues and was not shy to voice his frustrations and his disagreements upon the decision. And not only has it been, Kakko's been okay. He hasn't been, second overall pick level of hype, but he's been an okay forward for the Rangers so far this year. But as a whole, like the Sabres, the Rangers are in a really tough spot in the midst of a skid. Feels like something's got to give one way or the other here soon. So yeah, it could be possibly time for a change of scenery for Kaapo Kakko as well, who is now 23 years old, set to turn 24 in February. So clock is kind of ticking on him, and he's just never really found his footing in the NHL after having awesome performances at the U20 World Juniors and the World Championships during his draft year, leading to him being the second overall pick. His best season in the NHL came during the 2022-2023 campaign, in which he recorded 40 points, 18 goals, and 22 assists in 82 games. But aside from that, he hasn't reached 20 points in any other year except for his rookie campaign in the NHL. So, yeah, it's been a struggle for Kaapo Kakko. Feels like there could be a change of scenery coming. He is set to be a restricted free agent at the end of this year. He has a $2.1 million AAV. Does have arbitration rights, though, as an RFA, and then will become an unrestricted free agent in the summer of 2026. The question here again is, what would the Rangers want for Kaapo Kakko? I know they've traded Jacob Trouba, and they're in this really tough spot right here, right now, but and even looking at their roster as a whole, like, it's not good enough to be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. I still don't think they're in a position where they're going to absolutely tear it down in the middle of the year. And I don't know if they're going to tear it down whatsoever. It's a real conundrum here for the New York Rangers, but ultimately I feel like they'd want legitimate help on their forward, probably in their forward group, if I had to guess. And again, I just don't know if the Blackhawks have those pieces. And even if they did, would they feel comfortable? Like, who's expendable on this Blackhawks team? Ryan Donato is someone who's an unrestricted free agent, but he's the leading goal scorer. He's been great for this Blackhawks team. Do you really want to go and trade someone like Ryan Donato? Like, there are just so many limited pieces in terms of guys that can help the New York Rangers right here, right now, that the Blackhawks have on their roster. I think an interesting trade that I kind of threw around was Ryan Donato and a third for Kaapo Kakko. But again, I don't think Ryan Donato is expendable, and I absolutely wouldn't trade him. And all the rest of the UFAs, I don't think are going to be enough to move the needle for the New York Rangers to trade Kaapo Kakko, even though there are some frustrations. There's a little bit of turmoil there. I don't think it's likely that the Blackhawks are the team to get either of these trades done, but it is going to be really interesting to see what winds up shaking out from these things. And we have seen numerous members of the 2019 draft class already traded. Of course, Colton Dach. Kirby Dach, the third overall selection, was traded to the Montreal Canadiens the day of the 2022 NHL draft. The Blackhawks got the 13th and the 66th overall picks, a first-round pick that they turned into Frank Nazar, and a third that they turned into Gavin Hayes. But at that point in time, this was years ago, there was still a much higher ceiling for a young player like Kirby Dach. If that trade were to happen right here, right now, no way they're getting that type of return. The fourth overall pick, Bowen Byram, was also traded from the Colorado Avalanche in a one-for-one swap for Casey Middlestead, who was a pending restricted free agent. And I think that, again, is like the kind of deal that the New York Rangers could possibly be looking for out of Kaapo Kakko. But who on the Blackhawks are they going to trade for him, right? I don't really think it necessarily matches up. Vasily Podkolzin, the 10th overall pick, was traded to the Edmonton Oilers for a fourth-round pick last year, but he only had 35 points in 137 NHL games at the time, so the Rangers definitely can expect more than that. And then Alex Newhook, 16th overall pick to Montreal, was traded for a late first and an early second, but that was a Montreal team that was, or a Colorado Avalanche team that was willing to give up those draft picks, and Montreal was willing to take those on. I don't think the New York Rangers are in that same type of situation. So I think a Bowen Byram for Casey Middlestead as a pending RFA type of swap is one that I think would make sense for the Rangers and Kaapo Kakko here. I don't think Kakko's upside is even close to what Bowen Byram's was at that time, and I don't think they get the level of return that Casey Middlestead is, a top six center. They're not going to get a top six center for Kaapo Kakko, but I think that one-for-one pending RFA or UFA type of exchange, something that can give them a little bit of a boost for the Rangers, is what they're looking for, because I don't think they're going to tear it down and looking to get into a full-scale rebuild right here, right now. But there are my thoughts on whether we could see the Blackhawks pursue Dylan Cozens and or Kaapo Kakko. Again, I think it's extremely unlikely at this point in time. But coming up in just a minute here, Blackhawks fans, before I close out today's episode, I still got to get into a beefy Blackhawks prospects update. Real quick, though, I do got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the second half. Get ready to tackle the NFL action in the second half of the regular season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and win $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app now gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place, so that when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can go and check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you also happen to place your bets. Chicago Bears are down bad, folks. Yet another loss to the Minnesota Vikings on Monday night. And I said, hey, I think the smart strategy to be betting on the Bears the rest of the way is to be fading them. If you think that's the smart strategy as well, make sure to go and check out FanDuel.com, and you'll get started with $150 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, segment 3, before I close out today's episode, still got to get into a beefy Blackhawks prospect update. In case you guys didn't get the memo from last week, I will be having a Blackhawks prospect update once a week, every week for the remainder of the regular season. With the Blackhawks being at the bottom of the standings once again, looks like it's going to be another year far out of playoff contention. The prospects are going to be a main focal point of this organization and their future, so I feel it's only right that I cover them on a weekly basis here on the show. And as a reminder, Blackhawks fans, we are getting real close to that midway point of the season. That means I'll be dropping my Chicago Blackhawks mid-season prospect rankings within the next couple of weeks. I know that's something that numerous viewers and listeners are going to be very excited for. Keep your eyes out for that. And also, keep your eyes out for my Blackhawks Deep Dive 3.0 that I will be dropping tomorrow afternoon. Was actually supposed to come out yesterday, but as I mentioned, a little bit under the weather. Wasn't really sounding all that good on the mic, so decided to delay it until tomorrow and add one more game into the deep dive. But getting into this Blackhawks beefy prospects update, we got to start with 2023 67th overall selection, third round pick for the Blackhawks, Nick Lardis, who has already reached 50 points here on the season in 30 games for the Brantford Bulldogs of the OHL, 28 goals and 22 assists. Those 50 points, currently good for 5th in the league in scoring, 28 goals, good for 2nd behind only 2025 NHL draft prospect and potentially future Nick Lardis teammate Michael Misa. But what a year it has been for Nick Lardis, man. Producing at an even higher clip than we saw from him when he was healthy last year. He had 50 points in 37 games last year for the Bulldogs, already at 50 through 30 games this year, one fewer goal. And the kid doesn't turn 20 years old until the end of July. Still super young, still a lot of runway for his development. I think it is going to be a long path for him to reach the NHL level because he's most certainly going to have to adapt playing against grown men. Nick Lardis is a very undersized forward. Yeah, he's got a great shot, offensive abilities, good wheels. Going up against grown men is a different beast, though, and I think it's going to take Nick Lardis a little bit of time to figure that out if he ever does. But the development we've seen from him in the OHL has been marvelous, and I'm still left scratching my head how a kid who puts up this many points and goals has been left off Team Canada's roster. I truly do know the answer to that question. They wanted to go with a deeper roster and not just all offensive-minded players, but I still think Nick Lardis got snubbed. And speaking of the Brantford Bulldogs, should mention Blackhawks 2024 first-round pick, 27th overall selection, Marek Vanacker, teammate of Nick Lardis. A little bit of a slow start for him after returning to injury here. Only 5 points, 2 goals, and 3 assists through 8 games. I think that's kind of to be expected, though. Vanacker obviously was off of the ice for quite a while, didn't get a training camp, and is kind of having to ramp things up on the fly here. So expecting more production out of him as the season continues. Should be a lot of fun to watch Nick Lardis and Marek Vanacker, the two left wingers in the top 6 for Brantford in the remainder of the season. Sticking on with the OHL theme, Alex Ferrand continues to be one of the hidden gems in this Blackhawks prospect pool. Not that he has like legitimate top 6 upside or anything, but I think he has more offensive abilities than I gave him credit for as the 99th overall pick back in 2023. He's already up to 32 points, 15 goals, and 17 assists in 28 games this season, among the OHL leaders in power play goals. Does a lot of good things from in that bumper roll. Big body, 6'3", knows how to shoot the puck, and he also is still only 19 years old and doesn't turn 20 until next month. Because of these good last couple seasons out of Ferrand, I do think the Blackhawks organization is going to give him a chance with the Rockford IceHogs next year. I expect him to sign his entry-level deal. Already has 2 more points than he had in 68 games all of last year and is just 7 points shy of his career best. Jack Pridham, Blackhawks 2024 third-round pick, has been on fuego since joining the Kitchener Rangers in the OHL. 15 points, 8 goals, and 7 assists in 12 games. And even more than that, if you go and look at the highlights out of Jack Pridham, man, this kid can absolutely buzz. To me, he's going to be better than AJ Spellacy. And I love AJ Spellacy, but Jack Pridham as a third-round pick with the way he skates and his offensive abilities, and I know putting up numbers in the OHL is much different than the professional scene, but I think Jack Pridham from 2024 is going to be the hidden third-round pick gem from the Chicago Blackhawks, like Nick Lardis was the year prior. I am super high on Jack Pridham. The way he buzzes, his high hockey IQ, the way he sees the ice, and the way that he shoots the puck, man. This guy is a dual-threat offensive player, good passer, good goal scorer. I think he's going to put up some big-time numbers this year the rest of the way with Kitchener. AJ Spellacy, speaking of the Devil, also a third-round pick for the Blackhawks in 2024. A lot of good production for him in the Windsor Spitfires, up to 22 points, 11 goals, and 11 assists in 29 OHL games this year. And for reference, he only had 38 points in 67 games all of last year. So seen some big strides out of Spellacy as he's taken on a larger role with Windsor. I believe he's wearing the A for the Spitfires as well, so taking on a little bit of a leadership role. And the kid's still only 18 years old, not going to turn 19 until February. So a lot of good things out of him in his first NHL training camp. Excited to see him back there next year, and probably will try to have a little bit of the same type of success and give himself an opportunity to potentially, make the pro scene if he would like to. Martin Misiak, 2023 second-round pick for the Blackhawks, missed some time recently due to an injury, but has returned and is now up to 20 points, 10 goals, and 10 assists through his opening 21 games this year. He had 47 points, 23 goals, and 24 assists in 60 games last year. Is a little bit of an older prospect, though, from the 2023 draft class, as he's already going to turn 21 next fall in September. Quite honestly, I think Martin Misiak is a good, different type of prospect for the Blackhawks. I think he's going to be more defensive-minded. He's got some good size to him. There's just not a lot of offensive upside to his game for being the 55th overall pick. Very capped playmaking ability. I think he's going to be more of a goal scorer as his best offensive weapon at the next level. Would really like to see him continue to develop his playmaking abilities and hopefully keep playing the center ice position. Aiden Thompson, unfortunately, had his point streak snapped last week when I broke down my Blackhawks prospect update last week, but still the second leading scorer in all of college hockey, 24 points, 11 goals, 13 assists through 18 games for Denver. However, one thing I think I should point out is Aiden Thompson is a lot older than a lot of Blackhawks prospects and a lot of players in college hockey and from the 2022 NHL draft. He's already going to turn 23 years old in February. So should Denver make the Frozen Four, he'll be 23 years old playing for that team. And obviously that's going to cap the type of runway that Aiden Thompson has once he makes the leap to pro level. But regardless of all that stuff, still love to see him having the type of year that he is having, taking advantage of the opportunity being on the top line and already being just 8 points shy of his career best in 14 fewer games. Sam Rinzel, speaking of college prospects here for the Blackhawks as we transition there, Sam Rinzel, the 25th overall pick back in 2022, has been one of the best defensemen in all of college hockey. He's up to 20 points through his opening 20 games, 8 goals and 12 assists. Those 8 goals have him tied for all NCAA defensemen. Those 20 points have him tied for the most among all NCAA defensemen. It has been a fantastic start to Sam Rinzel's sophomore year. And how about the goal scoring? Only had 2 goals in 39 games as a freshman last year. He's got 8 goals through 20 games. Again, tied with Zeev Buium for the most goals among defensemen in all. Actually, I think he's tied with Zeev Buium for most points among defensemen, but is tied with 8 goals among all defensemen in college hockey as well. And Sam Rinzel isn't going to turn 21 years old until June. There is so much runway, so much more room for him to develop. I think he's going to be a real special player because of his wheels. And again, love to see the uptick in goal scoring this year Oliver Moore, another member of the Minnesota Golden Gophers, 19th overall pick in 2023, has really started to get it going here as well. He's now up to 17 points in 20 games on the year, 5 goals and 12 assists. Was nearly a point per game guy as a freshman for the Golden Gophers, 33 points in 39 games. And very similar to this year, he got off to slow starts in both of his first 2 college seasons, but has started to find his footing as, Big Ten play picks up and the year starts to get a little bit more serious. And again, Oliver Moore, still a young man, isn't going to turn 20 until next month in January. Speaking of young men, Sasha Boisvert, freshman for the University of North Dakota, has been phenomenal for the Fighting Sioux. He's up to 17 points now through his first 19 NCAA games, 8 goals and 9 assists. I think he has 4 goals in his last 5 games. This kid can rifle the biscuit, Blackhawks fans, especially on the power play. I don't know how much playmaking upside he's going to have, but he's got good size, and boy, can he absolutely rifle it. One of the best shooters in all of college hockey immediately. And again, Sasha Boisvert isn't going to turn 19 until March. I liked the player. It was just who was there at the time with the 18th overall pick, but that never shied me away from Sasha Boisvert. I think he could be a good player. I think there's a capped upside because of his lack of playmaking, but there's no denying his goal-scoring abilities. Dominic James, it hasn't been the year for University of Minnesota Duluth that he or their squad would have liked, but as a 6th-round pick, he's put up some pretty good numbers in college hockey. Obviously missed basically all of his junior campaign due to a knee injury, but has returned and hasn't skipped a beat. 17 points in his first 14 games to lead the charge for the Bulldogs so far this year. 9 goals and 8 assists through 14 games, which has him just 11 points shy of his previous career best, which he earned in 35 games as a sophomore. Again, has only played in 14 games so far this year, but is a little bit older like Aiden Thompson. He's set to turn 23 years old in July, but has good wheels. I think he could be a center iceman. Decent upside for being a 6th-round pick. I think he will get an entry-level contract with the Blackhawks. Roman Kanserov, 44th overall selection in the 2023 NHL draft, has been dynamite over in the KHL so far this year. 7 goals, 7 assists, 14 points through 16 games. He only had 15 points in 53 regular season games all of last year before going on a nice postseason run to help Metallurg win the Gagarin Cup. But Kanserov, being nearly a point-per-game guy in that league at 20 years old, super, super impressive. Is set to turn 21 in September, is going to play in the KHL again next year, but I really hope this kid comes over to North America after, because his offensive abilities, his motor, his speed, I think sets up nicely for the NHL level. Artem Levshinov, the 2nd overall pick, of course, in the 2024 NHL draft, has spent all of his first pro season down with the Rockford Ice Hogs thus far. Been a little bit of a mixed bag of results for him, which, to be fair, I think is to be expected. Kid is still so raw. I mean, he's basically not even 2 years removed from Belarus, and not to knock on them, but imagine the difference between training and facilities here in the United States at the NHL and pro level compared to what he was experiencing in Belarus. And it was a quick turnaround for him at Michigan State, quick turnaround this past summer for him to get drafted and then turning pro. There are going to be peaks, there are going to be valleys in Artem Levshinov's development. He's just very raw, and quite honestly, I think he's going to spend most of next year down in Rockford as well. But he is up to 9 points in 22 AHL games thus far, 2 goals and 7 assists, getting good opportunities down there. But again, I think the Blackhawks are going to continue to let him marinate until he proves and tells the front office he's ready for a call-up, which I imagine isn't going to come until next year. Last but certainly not least, got to give a shout-out to 2020 second-round pick Colton Dach, who has continued to be a force for the Ice Hogs despite a lot of other players getting called up here in recent weeks. Dach is now up to 19 points, 9 goals, and 10 assists through 25 games this year. The current leading scorer for the Ice Hogs, with Frank Nazar up at the NHL level. And to compare that to what Dach had in his first pro campaign last year, he had 27 points in 48 games. So much better production, much more consistent, has taken on a power forward role, and I think has diversified his game a little bit. And according to numerous reports, the Blackhawks are very happy about where he's at. Quite honestly, I think Colton Dach is a couple weeks away from a call-up, Blackhawks fans. He's been right on the cusp these last couple of years, and I think that kind of mean streak that he's added, in addition to his offensive production, has kind of established a new role and a new edge for Colton Dach that I think is going to lead to his first NHL call-up sooner rather than later. All right, that is going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, Thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may listen to your podcast, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way you can get the latest episode as soon as it's uploaded each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me on X at Jack Bushman 2, but you got to go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until the next episode, everyone, which is my Blackhawks Deep Dive 3.0, be on the lookout for that tomorrow. Until then, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.